everyone, and welcome to the lineup. Today is September the 9th, 2021. I'm Barry Stagner, and as you can see, we're in a little bit different of a setting, and I've got someone here with me this week. Really looking forward to our time together with Amir Tsarfati of Behold Israel Ministries. And Amir, we've got a pretty big weekend coming up.
Yes, we've got the Behold He Comes Bible Prophecy Conference at Calvary Chapel of Chino Hills. And together with Jack Hibbs and Jan Markell, both of us will also be speaking. And it's going to be a very packed weekend.
It is. It's going to be a wonderful time talking about all the things we love to talk about. And encourage you, if you haven't done so already, go to beholdhecomes.org and you can purchase a live stream pass there for $5. You're going to pick up a lot of behind the scenes information as well that's not going to be available to those who are live in-person viewing. So I encourage you, sign up and be a part of this day, no matter where you are in the world. So
the live stream is for the Saturday conference. Friday is something we added because we had to. It was sold out so quickly. But Friday won't be, to the best of my knowledge, won't be online. It's the Saturday one.
Saturday is live stream. So, but it's a repeat of Friday.
Correct.
So
Same
you're not going to miss anything. So encourage you, get signed up for that. And actually, Amir, we're kind of in a little bit of a string here of events.
Correct.
Because we're headed for Dallas next. And
Correct.
Leesburg, Virginia.
Yeah, we've got the awaiting his return conferences both in Fort Worth in Texas as well as in Leesburg, Virginia, and we will be speaking there as well, together with other speakers such as Mike Olay and also Jack Hibbs in Fort Worth. And we will also have the local pastors of the church in Fort Worth and in Leesburg sharing with us as well. It's going to be wonderful. I'm really excited because honestly, every day that passes, we're like, are we still here?
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it is. And we are in that day and hour where we have to keep looking up. Our redemption is nigh, and nothing is more exciting or comforting than that in the world that we have going on around us today. Mm-hmm. And we're going to kind of double up here and do a bit of a Middle East update that Amir normally does, and we often point you to on the Behold Israel platforms. But we're also going to talk about some of our usual things that we discuss here on the lineup. And Amir, I want to start with something that I think, especially in you, I'm so thankful for your great passion and love for the United States. And all of us have been watching a digression take place that really follows a pattern that the book of Romans had laid out. And we found our nation promoting the anti-biblical theory of Darwin, that everything just kind of happened. And then we've seen the sexual revolution that Romans 1 predicted. And now we're in a state where it seems as though our country's been given over. And sadly, watching this happen to a wonderful country has been heartbreaking for many of us. And a couple of things I think that are indicators concerning the whole prophetic scenario. And the first is a story that comes from the Gatestone Institute, and it talks about the fallout from the Afghan crisis. And the headline says, Biden ruins America's most important relationship with India. And the story goes on to say, if Washington is going to deter a militant China, it needs the support of democratic India. And unfortunately, India looks like the country most immediately and perhaps most adversely affected by the Biden-created debacle. And as a result, New Delhi could decide to side not with America, but with China.
Exactly. You know, believe it or not, people accuse me for hating America. Somebody wrote me, why do you hate America? I mean, you should be, look, I love America. I lament for what is happening to America. As someone who visits America every year for the last 25 years, I see the decline of the country.
Yes.
Because it's easier to see it as a guest from the outside. Now, I will say something. America has the strongest military in the world.
Yes.
But even when you have the strongest military in the world, you can still be perceived weak. The perception is what matters in the Middle East, at least. And as of now, and I believe that article almost hinted about that, America is being perceived weak by Iran, by North Korea, by China, by Russia, by Turkey, and every possible mouse is coming out of its holes right now, and we see that all around, and it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see that, but at the same time, we all know it had to happen. How many years have we been talking about the fact that the absence of America in
Bible
scriptures
prophecy? That's right.
might be related to the decline of America?
Right. There was a catastrophic error that was committed, and that's one thing I appreciate about Israel, and having everyone serve in the military gives you a bit of a mindset of defensive country, a nationalistic type of attitude, which is of great value in any given country. But one of the things I think that's so bizarre about these recent events is you don't pull the military out first, you pull them out last.
Yes.
You get all the citizens and all of your those who were your associates and contractors, out of the country, and then the military comes out last. But here we've got, I think, evidence on the world stage that there's a weakened state, as you mentioned, of America, poor leadership, and catastrophic errors being made where you have other countries that are military-minded that are looking at this and saying, hey, these guys don't know what they're doing.
And I think that what everybody is criticizing America for is the attitude of boasting that we created the Afghan army, we funded the Afghan army, we trained the Afghan army, and we equipped the Afghan army, so it has to be good. It has to do well when we leave. And the understanding that the Taliban long ago infiltrated into the Afghan military, and it was just a matter of 2 hours. It wasn't even a matter of days or weeks. It's a matter of hours that this big Afghan army that America America wanted the Palestinians to create an army, and they wanted to take Benjamin Netanyahu to tour Afghanistan and to see how it works, how America can create someone else to protect you rather than you. Your enemy should. It's not working. No. And we saw that, and it's very sad.
Talking about the opportunistic nations out there, the Gatestone is also reporting that Erdogan has plans for the future of Afghanistan, as well as China, Russia, and other terrorist countries. And the U.S. and the EU should not buy Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's fake pro-Western posture, the article says, such as when he offered to run the Kabul airport. I mean, what a generous offer.
He's a very generous man. He's a very generous man.
So thoughtful.
Exactly. He realized, look, there is a Sunni Muslim country that has no patron, no father. I mean, let's face it, Iran controls the Shiites, but Erdogan wants to be the person who will be the father of Sunni Islam. He wants to go back to the Ottoman Empire, the Caliphate.
He's the Sultan.
There you go. And so for that, what better than now offering his services to Afghanistan? And by the way, Afghanistan is very rich with natural resources.
Yes.
And, China is not cutting deals with the Taliban right now for nothing. It's for very precious metals that you can get there, and for lithium, for minerals there that you need for batteries and all of that. The Chinese literally, behind the scenes, under the ground, worked on a deal with the Taliban way before that, and now they're reaping all of the fruits.
Yeah. Breaking Christian News asked the question about Biden's State Department, why they stopped these planes from Glenn Beck and others filled with American refugees. And the article says they were on the plane, they were on the tarmac, they were in the seats ready to go, and the U.S. State Department officials told them to go back to the airport and hand over everything to the Taliban as far as obtaining clearance and these kind of things. And again, if we're looking at the Ezekiel war scenario, the protesting nations being the Arab Gulf states led by the Saudis, and yet here you've got America absent, from this invasion of our greatest Middle East ally. And, here I think the numbers have been floating around. Israel's population broke 9.2 million. And the second largest home to Jews in the world is the United States.
Correct.
And yet here we are,
6 million Jews here.
6 million Jews, 6.2 in Israel. And here we are moving away from our greatest ally, the only true democracy in the Middle East. And here there's a coalition of nations that invade from the north, shared ideology among them. And yet, where's the U.S. in all this? And
It's very sad.
these things, I think, are potentially
Yeah.
feeding into why the U.S. has no voice in such a great and catastrophic event that's going to happen.
And
in
it seems like
Israel.
your State Department is so clueless, either clueless or evil. I'm not sure. I mean, I want to believe it's clueless,
Yeah.
because if it's evil, that's the worst. That your own government works against its own people. It's very sad. But
Yeah.
clueless, I want to believe it's the case, because I saw what they how they handled themselves with Iran, and how they foolishly and in a naive way they thought Iran is really into the deal. But as you're going to see in a few minutes, the deal is over.
Yeah. Moving over to the States, there's an article from the Daily Caller that the headline reads, "Taking Down Pro-Life Websites, Donating to Planned Parenthood, How Tech Companies Are Fighting the Texas Abortion Law." We just had the wonderful Texas Heartbeat Act put into place by the state of Texas, that if there's a heartbeat that's found via ultrasound, you are not allowed by law to abort that child. And, you and I are very familiar with restrictions on social media and going through all that. And here you've got some major companies that are seeking to influence this decision and penalize Texas. Companies like Rideshare that owns Lyft. Also, they made Lyft made $1 million donation to Planned Parenthood because of the Texas Heartbeat Law. Uber did the same kind of thing, announced it would cover the legal fees of its drivers sued under the Texas Heartbeat Act for taking someone to get an abortion, driving them to an area where they're allowed. GoDaddy has kicked off pro-life websites off their hosting service. And there's one in particular I thought that was interesting. There's a couple of dating sites, one called Match Group, same kind of thing. We're not going to support this. We're fighting against it. And there's a dating app in Texas called Bumble. And it's run by women. It says in the article, this is women founded and women led. And from day one, we've stood up for the most vulnerable. Here they are talking about half of these abortions are young ladies, are female.
Of course.
And yet, we're standing up for the vulnerable. That's what we've done for our whole career. And, it just feeds into the fact that this world has lost its mind. And the delusion that Paul wrote of to the church of Thessaloniki is well underway.
They call good evil and evil good.
Yeah.
I mean, to save life. And I always tell people, it's not pro-life versus pro-choice. God told us to choose life. Pro-choice is pro-life.
Yeah.
It's pro-life versus pro-death.
Yeah.
That's how, last time I checked, the opposite of life is death.
That's right.
And that's how Moses was, heard from the Lord. Here I put before you today, evil and good, life and death. Choose life, he says. So to choose life, it's pro-choice. And we need to choose life.
Yeah.
And he likened the death, when you choose death, to evil.
Yeah. And as Isaiah says, woe to those who call evil good and good evil. And woes are coming. There's no question about it.
Big time.
CNN is reporting, and not a normal news source for me, but reporting that the Department of Homeland Security is saying white Americans support the Taliban and are poised to carry out terror attacks at any moment. Now, again, I think we've talked about this in the past. I've mentioned it multiple times. One of the main tenets of controlling a nation in a socialistic or communistic fashion is controlling the narrative.
Yeah.
And here they are, presenting who they perceive to be the primary enemies with advancing their globalist agenda here in the United States. So, I mean, they're not even veiling this ridiculous attack that, it's the white people, it's the white Americans that are the big threat here on the homeland.
And it's amazing because most of who runs CNN are white people.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's now we're the evil people and we need to clean our conscience or whatever it is. It's very sad because it stands exactly opposite to the very simple, basic principle that all of us were born sinners. Yeah. And it has nothing to do with your color of the skin. And here it's almost like one color is evil while the other is not. And in reality, by the way, reality, facts, and numbers speaks exactly the opposite. Last time I checked, it wasn't the Anglo-Saxon people who attacked America in 9/11. And you can ask any law enforcement that will tell you the numbers. Yeah. Now we don't judge people by their color. We all of us are sinners, and we all need salvation through Jesus. That's it. Period. Yeah. The minute you insinuate that one is more sinner than the other, you already break that very basic thing that we all need to understand.
Yeah, and yet Jesus said in the Olivet Discourse, in the initial comments that he made, that ethnic tensions are going to be part of the scenario that indicate that his return is near and imminent.
Yeah.
And here's another component of that, Amir, from the Wall Street Journal. That is, Australia's top court finds media companies liable for other people's Facebook comments. And Australia's highest court found that newspapers and television stations that post articles on Facebook Inc.'s platform are liable for other Facebook users' comments on those posts, a ruling that could prompt traditional publishers to rethink how they engage with social media. And that is exactly the goal, to get these
to put the muzzle.
That are using the muzzle on them, control the narrative, make sure they're saying the things that they want to be heard, and holding them responsible for what some unknown individual who uses their platform says is beyond ridiculous, and it's just tyranny, basically.
Yeah. And it also removes the responsibility of the individual to carry himself in an honorable way. Now, you understand? I mean, it's because it's not going to be his fault anyway. So in other words, it's wrong in all aspects if you really think about it, that ruling.
Right.
And it's crazy.
That's an interesting point, because if we really think about the age that we live in, blame shifting and transference is the order of the day. Whatever I am and whatever I do and whatever I say and whatever I think is somebody else's fault.
Exactly.
And so here you've got now you've got these companies, and we know how important social media is, and case in point, here we are, speaking about what the Bible says through social media platforms, and they absolutely have to take control of this and to force consequences on, Facebook or any other platform for what people's comments are. Is I don't know, sounds a lot like somebody state-run media kind of thing, which we know is not good. President came out today and mentioned that there's going to be new restrictions. Companies having more than 100 employees are going to be required to vaccinate. And, this has already thrown a lot of dust in the air. And I think we'll see this kind of play out in the courtroom in the coming days. So, again, just control is what we're seeing. Now, Amir, I want to throw out a few things. I'm just going to read some headlines, because we often talk about the fact that, when Jesus used the word seismos in the Olivet Discourse, because that's related to seismic, we often limit that to geological events. But the seismos actually can mean a gale or a tempest. It can mean something that's happening in the atmosphere. So in essence, what he's saying is there's going to be geological and weather-related anomalies that are bizarre in the last days. And we're starting to see these things, here in the California, we are in a major drought. And then you've got other portions of our country that are absolutely flooded to record levels.
Yes.
And we're seeing repeatedly the word record-breaking or unprecedented. And we're seeing it all over the world. This first article headline reads, Beijing's flood season ends with 70% above average precipitation in China. 70% above average. Seeing a 3 or 4% increase would be newsworthy. 70% is astronomical. More heavy rain expected in Auckland, reads another headline, after severe flooding caused by 49% of August rainfall in one day. 149% of the annual rainfall.
And more.
In one day. New Jersey's largest dairy devastated by an EF3 Class 3 tornado.
I heard your president said you don't call them tornadoes anymore. Is there a new name that I missed?
Well, I don't know. That's a new one on me.
I'm telling you, it's funny.
Who knows what's coming out of the 1500
Exactly.
Pennsylvania Avenue anymore? And Michigan says dangerous squall line likely this afternoon has produced grapefruit-size hail. This summer was Europe's hottest on record as the Mediterranean heat soared, and the Dixie Fire is blazing its way to become California's biggest. It was the second largest almost immediately. So we're seeing these extremes in atmospheric type events happening, and they happen every week. And we report on this constantly because they're growing in frequency and intensity. And he also mentioned pestilence. I want to cover these two things and then get on with some things about the Middle East. USA Today said that 45 counties across Pennsylvania and New Jersey are under quarantine because of the spotted lantern fly. And the notorious lantern fly continues to wreak havoc on the East Coast, and New Jersey adds more counties to its quarantine list. Now, these are kind of interesting because what they do is they wind up covering a tree completely and basically smothering it, or a bush or a shrub or whatever. So there's, an unusual level of these lantern flies this year. And then on top of that, the USA Today reports that there's here's our word, unprecedented outbreak of armyworms destroying lawns across the U.S., often overnight. It says the troops are marching and munching through lawns across the country, leaving grass and plants dead in their wake. And I had to cover that because we know what's going to go on during the tribulation. All the grass is going to be burned up.
Yeah.
Every green tree is going to be consumed by heat and the events happening from outside our planet and all that. It's just good reminders.
A good reminder. I'm also telling people what you see now. It's
Nothing.
If you think you're in the tribulation, you're up for a very, very bad surprise.
Yeah.
This is nothing. I mean, we can still go to the beach, go to have coffee, have our lunch. People ask me, a friend of mine texted me, and they're from New Zealand. What do you have to say about how this world is falling apart? And I said, look, it's not as of now, let's put things in the right proportion. I said, imagine yourself living in Europe, Western Europe, between 1939 and 1945. 6 years of hell on earth with war, death, and horrible atrocities done, to humanity. And said, think about it. It didn't last a year or two, 6 years. So yes, we are seeing hardships, but it's nothing compared to what this world has seen already.
That's right.
And the tribulation is stuff that the world has never seen yet.
Yeah.
So think about the level of evil and destruction and I always tell people, don't take the things that are happening today and rush to compare them to anything that happened before or to anything that will happen in the future. For example, if somebody will tell me today, what happens now with COVID is the Holocaust, you've never seen you probably don't have a clue what the Holocaust was all about. Or if somebody's going to tell me, this is it, we're in the tribulation, you probably never read the book of Revelation to understand. So we have our portion of evil for now, and with Christ, we can go through it.
Yeah.
And I'll go now to tell you a few things that happen in the Middle East,
yes,
if you may. In the Middle East, we, first of all, I'm an Israeli, very proud Israeli, as you know, but more than ever before, I sympathize with Americans nowadays and how you guys feel having this new administration since January.
Yeah.
I have never been so ashamed in my entire life in my own government as I have been in the last 2.5 months. Within 2.5 to 3 months, Israel managed, the Israeli government with its complete reckless and lack of common sense decisions, managed to turn Israel from a regional superpower to a joke in almost every aspect you can think of. First of all, remember the days where I will report on strike in Syria almost every other day?
Yeah.
Because we took care of business.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as of late, we don't have them as often, and when we have them, they are not effective anymore. The Russians are no longer helping Israel in this battle, and they're actually switched sides. The Russians right now, minutes after Israel strikes, the Russians are the one that release a statement saying 23 out of the 25 missiles that Israel launched were actually thwarted by the Russian-made anti-aircraft system that the Syrians. So the Russians are like boasting in how successful Syrians are in thwarting the Israeli strike. Another thing I want you to know, one of the major generals in Israel testified a couple days ago, and he said, in eastern Syria, hundreds of precise GPS-guided missiles are already aimed at Israel. You understand what I'm saying? These are not missiles that they fall around. They fall exactly within a matter of couple meters from your target, which means complete destruction. Hundreds of them. I'm not talking about Hezbollah in Lebanon. They're already in eastern Syria. How do they bring them? In cooling trucks, like refrigerated trucks for vegetables. They cross the border and then we see them unloading. Do we do anything there? No, we're not doing anything. And this is very, very sad, honestly. Another thing, and by the way, all that I'm saying you can find on my Telegram channel, because you can see the pictures and the videos on that channel posted almost every day. Another thing I posted is the Russian flag is a few miles away from the Israeli border. The city of Daraa, where the Syrian civil war started 10 and a half years ago, now the Russians are trying to broker a ceasefire there, and now there is a Russian flag flying. Listen, not only that we hear Russian, there is a Russian flag next to the Israeli border. How much more do we need to understand that Rosh is definitely almost at our border right now?
Let me ask you to expand on that a little bit. What do the Russians care about the Golan and the northern border of Israel?
Yeah.
What's their interest there?
The Russians have two interests in Syria. First of all, Syria has always been their warm water seaport. You understand, Russia is in a very cold area.
Right.
Their ports freeze during the winter. That means anyone can attack them in the wintertime and they won't be able to move. So they proudly own in Tartus in Syria their own seaport. Now, when they saw that Syria was about to fall apart, when Assad sent his general and Soleimani also came and they told him, listen, within 2 weeks, Assad is falling. If he's falling, those rebels, those Islamists are actually going to come to Chechnya and you're going to see them in Moscow later. He realized he needs to do something about it. And that's where, he turned things around with the Russian army now heavily present in Syria. Russia is waiting for the moment to cut all the fat contracts that will be there for the reconstruction of Syria. Putin already promised to every billionaire in Russia fat contracts, rebuilding airports, rebuilding the electricity grid, rebuilding their water supply, rebuilding cities, kindergarten, schools. It's all supposed to be Russians. So Russia wants to enjoy the fruit of the day after. But unfortunately, it's not working. Every time they think things are under control, then comes the Iranians and their think Hezbollah is coming, then Assad is, and then there's the rebels, and the Russians are in very big problem right now. Russia wants an end or a gain, financial gain. Now, if they won't get it from Syria, guess where they're going to get it from? What is the whole premises of the Ezekiel war? Plunder,
Booty.
steal, booty. It's all financial gain. It's not political or religious war. It's financial gain when it comes to the Russians. And we know that Israel has gas, Israel has oil, and Israel has also technology that the Russians want. And it's obvious that if they can't get it anywhere, and if Israel will be perceived as the aggressor, as they are now painting us very gladly, it will be a matter of, time, not long from now, that it's going to happen. And by the way, speaking of the weakness that the Americans are showing, and again, America is strong. Don't get me wrong, the strongest military in the world. But when their hands are tied behind their back, when they're run by policy, look, in America, the president is the commander-in-chief. It's not the general. So if the president is saying we get out of Afghanistan by August and we get out of Iraq by December, that's what's going to happen. The army can be as good and great, but it's not going to work. But let me tell you something. A week ago, I think I reported that China declared that a certain area in the South Chinese Sea that is, disputed area is now under their control. They never said that before. Now they demand that every vessel, whether it's submarine or ship, will get their permission. Now, a couple days ago, 19 Chinese aircrafts were spotted in the airspace of Taiwan, of which some are nuclear bombers and fighter jets. It has never been seen before. And we're watching something that is, very interesting. Now, let's move to Iran. And all of that is happening because of the aftershock of the Afghanistan events. As of this morning, a senior American, I'm not allowed to say his name because it's still not, I guess, something for public to know. He said, well, the option of Iran going back to the table of negotiations for the Iran deal is over because it is obvious to us that Iran is taking the military nuclear option. That's it. It's a done deal. And he basically says we need to accept the fact that Iran is going to be nuclear. May I say that I believe Iran will become nuclear because it's not only America that is no longer pushing for Iran not to be. Israel has the weak government, the government of change. And the government of change in Israel is not interested in wars. What we see in Gaza, peace and security. Yeah. In Gaza, what we see in Gaza, Gazans, Hamas is firing stuff and sending balloons with explosives and all of that. And what are we doing? We are rewarding them with, okay, we will allow you now cement. We will allow you now metals and all of that earlier we did not. Because they're using all of that for what? For tunnels, terror tunnels. Israel and Hamas is like, what's going on here? Netanyahu he didn't give us anything. Yeah. Hamas thought this is an Israeli stunt. They're giving us all of this to maybe cause us to lower our guards and then they'll strike. No, we're not. We are, excuse me for my French, stupid. We are ignorant. We are doing stuff now that is on. I've never seen Hamas. I've never seen the Palestinians in the last few years so emboldened. And, West Bank is now there's crazy stuff going on there. Yeah. Yeah. Even in East Jerusalem. Certainly in Gaza. 6 prisoners managed to escape an Israeli prison. 6 prisoners. Yeah. And now it's the joke of the Arab world. How in the world?
Maximum security.
Maximum security prison. They dug a hole and came out from outside and that's it. And nobody paid attention. Yeah. Israel is now being perceived. Now again, just like Israel is strong, but we're being perceived as weak. America is strong, but it's being perceived as weak. And in the Middle East, perception, it's what matters. Yeah. And by the way, if you think the Taliban, for example, changed its skin, and right now they're very, very, respectable people who take care of the people. Let me show you 2 things that happened, and you can find it on Telegram. Yesterday, they entered into the Norwegian embassy. They took over the embassy. Entered in, and the ambassador says, what's going on here? So we need to inspect that you don't have alcohol here, and we need to go over the books to make sure it's proper. The books inside the embassy. that and I posted on Telegram the ambassador and what he said. It's like unbelievable. Those, they don't even have shoes on them. They tell you what, they entered into the National Institution for Music in Kabul, and they destroyed all the music instruments. Why? Because music is not allowed under Islam rules in the way it is being, used right now. It's terrible. Another thing I wanted to say is, and it's probably the last thing, it's Lebanon. And I think you know that. I reported that. Lebanon has no electricity. And the entire country is falling apart. And the world is trying to help them. And it's funny because all Israel is offering help. They don't want it. So they have three options. One option, to get Egyptian gas from Egypt down across to Jordan, up through Syria into Lebanon. They just forgot that half of this pipe is not working. Second option, to bring electricity from Jordan through Syria into Lebanon. They just forgot that 60% of the poles are now, of the electricity poles, are down in Syria. And number three, Iraq will supply heavy fuel oil via pipes that, by the way, half of them are not used and usable even. All the options in the world. Who's going to pay for it? Nobody knows. But one thing for sure, no help from Israel. It is beyond me to see that, but I can clearly see, honestly, I'm seeing the Middle East getting ready much closer to a war than anything. And look, 2 years ago, what did we celebrate? Peace. Yeah. 2 years ago, at this time of the year, a year ago. Yeah. A year ago at this time of the year, we celebrated the Abraham Accord, peace with Bahrain, peace with the UAE, peace with Morocco, peace with Sudan. Come on. And the person who sits in the White House, look, the identity of this person in the White House changes everything. And look, everything we talk about now is war, escalation, tension, death, misery, pain, weakness. It's horrible. But none of us should be surprised. America has to be perceived weak and become weak. Israel has to be perceived. Why would anyone start a war against Israel or invade into Israel if they know Israel is super strong? And Israel has to be perceived as weak in order for Ezekiel war to take place. And I'm thinking to myself, of all the time periods God granted us the amazing privilege of living in the days where more prophecies are being fulfilled than ever before. Right. And I don't know if, I know throughout generations, even in the time of Paul, that he was expecting the rapture. How much more we that see the day approaching, how much more we should expect the rapture very, very soon.
Well, it's incredible to think about what Jesus talked about in the whole of the Olivet Discourse, but two things come to mind kind of as we wrap things up. He said, when you see these things begin or at the initiation stage, look up, for your redemption is nigh. But he opened the whole Olivet Discourse by saying these are the beginning of sorrow.
Exactly.
So you've got that same word employed by the Lord talking about, it's the initiation portion is significant as well. And that's where we're at. And that's why I think, as you said, more now than ever, and even in church history, now more than ever, we should be expecting that trumpet blast and that transport into the heavenly realm in a moment and a twinkling of an eye. Because the redemption of these bodies is nigh. Yeah. The dead in Christ are going to rise. And we who are alive and remain will be caught up and meet him in the air.
Correct. We need to stay focused. I think the church is being distracted with so many different things right now, and we're not watching what Satan is actually really doing, even within Christianity. How many woke churches are there now? Even here in Southern California, they don't even teach repentance anymore, sin. They don't teach the basic principles of Christianity, and because we're so busy doing other things, and we don't pay attention to this. But I'm very glad that even though almost nothing that we talked about today is good, we have the good news.
Yes, we do. And things are going to get better for us real fast.
Amen. Amen.
Well, that's all the time we have. So thanks for joining us. Make sure you follow Amir on Telegram and sign up for his YouTube channel, Behold Israel. And you can also follow our Telegram channel. Just look up my name. Our YouTube, you can find it under The Truth About God or simply my name. And so glad you joined us. Pray that you are blessed in your efforts to glorify the Lord, and look forward to seeing you someday, as we've been saying of late, either here, there, or in the air.